Hello and welcome to Making Home Better. In this video, we're going to go over our theater here. It's a theater that we put together roughly a year and a half, maybe about 2 years ago. This is certainly a passion project, something that's been on my mind for many years. Because of that, I have put in a lot of effort in researching the various components that make up the theater, the build itself, the layout of the room, and even how to future-proof it as much as possible, as I don't want this to be outdated right when the next component comes out. With the money that we spent in accomplishing this setup, I am very much satisfied with the output that we got. I will do my best to include details in the video itself about the designs, the components, etc., as well as include some affiliate links in the description. Please do check it out. Even if you don't go with the exact setup that we did, which obviously this is not one size fits all, I'm hoping that it helps you in your research in putting together your home theater, as this is not very difficult to achieve and the output is really worth it. So let's check it out. At the landing of the staircase here, we have our door to the theater. This is a exterior door. The reason for the exterior door is to control the noise and keep it inside the theater as much as possible. The overall dimension of the theater is approximately 20 feet in lengthwise and 14 feet in widthwise. And out of the 20 feet, there's roughly about 20 inches taken up by a cavity that's behind the screen, and that's because this is an acoustically transparent screen so that the front speakers are actually sitting behind the screens. So that we can maximize the viewing angle of the theater, we went ahead and put in a stadium style seating where there's 2 tiers of seats, and the second tier sits 12 inches higher than the first. As you can see, we went with a very dark tone of paint on the walls, and this is in matte finish, and the idea here is to prevent any glares coming off of the wall as you're enjoying your theater. Throughout the theater, we also added this trim detail just to make things pop a little bit. There's also a closet added in the back just for storage purposes. In hindsight, I probably would have just avoided doing it and added the extra space in the back, although it's possible that the angled wall helps with some of the acoustics in the room. The theater does have 3 windows to the outside. What we did here is we added some blackout curtains on each of those, which are kind of velcroed right onto the glass. This way, very little, if any, light is let through. Couple of tips to consider when you're working on the build out of the theater would be to add some blocking so that it's easier to mount the projector when the time comes, as well as add a conduit from the projector to where your AV equipment is, so that in the event that you need to add some additional cabling in the future, you can do that. All the walls of the theater is outfitted with Rockwell soundproof insulation so that we limit as much noise as possible from exiting the theater as you're enjoying some good sound. Now, I will tell you, it does not solve it completely, but it certainly limits the sound that's heard in the rest of the house. Another tip that you can possibly do, although I did not do this, I've read online that some people add either 2 layers of drywall on top of the insulation, as well as possibly adding an MDF layer on the walls or on the ceiling to prevent sound from exiting the theater. We also added a smart switch to the theater. This was connected to our Google Home. That way, as you're enjoying the theater, you can just sit down and say, "Hey Google, turn the theater light off," and the entire room becomes ready for your movie. As I mentioned before, this is an acoustically transparent screen, and therefore the speakers are behind the screen. Initially, the plan was to have all the AV equipment, which is now situated down here in a different spot. But as we were building out the cavity behind it, there was a lot of dead space, and we decided to utilize that with some shelves as well as to store all the AV equipment. I think you'll also find that as you are doing your design, as you're doing your build out, you'll find ways to further improve, and you just have to adapt with those and make the most of it. Let's talk about the screen itself. As mentioned, the front speaker placement is behind the acoustically transparent screen. So we have the left, the right, and the center speakers right here. And I went with floor standing speakers for all of them. So the middle speaker is right dead in almost in the middle of the screen. Having the speakers behind the screen gives it a very clean look to the theater, as well as it provides really good sound, especially for the speaking voices. Initially, the plan was not to have the AV equipment down here. So as we changed our plans, all the cablings were routed behind the screen and comes to the cavity below here. Since there are a lot of speaker cables, it ended up being a very thick bundle, and it was really tough to control. So cable management down here has been very tough. We also have shelving on either side of the screens. These are both nailed in, glued in, as well as use some silicone on all sides to make sure that they're secure so that it prevents any rattling at all when the sound is fully going. Right now we just use it to store blankets and some pillows, etc., as well as the remotes and such on one side. This is working out well. Over 400 feet of speaker wire was used for the full basement, including 4 speakers outside the theater for a second zone in the common areas. We used 12 gauge CL3 rated Amazon basic cabling throughout. This is fairly thick, heavy wire to help with the sound. Since I had full access during the build, I decided to run speakers for an 11 channel system to future proof. Currently the theater is set up for 9 channels, or a 7.2.2 Dolby ATMOS setup with 2 height speakers, as well as the 2 rear, 2 surrounds, 2 fronts, a center, and the 2 subwoofers. One of the smartest things I did in setting up the theater was to run a lot of additional cabling, especially Cat 6 cabling from my main router down to the receiver and the various components that are hooked up here. The hardwired Cat 6 cable for the AV equipment makes streaming extremely seamless with no issues or wireless connectivity problems. I also ran a Cat 6 cable from the AV equipment area to the projector to help future-proof. From my research, it looks like the HDMI cable also may be getting replaced by Cat 6 in the future, so a small cost to do now to not worry about it in the future. I was a little concerned about the HDMI link between the AV equipment and the projector, which is roughly 35 feet. To be on the safe side, I left 2 HDMI cables connected just for some redundancy in case one fails. As also mentioned earlier, I also left a conduit from the screen area to the projector to allow for any future cabling needs. Sound is obviously a big part of any theater. This is also likely the area that I spend a lot of time trying to listen to different speakers at our local dealer here close by called ABT, listening to different speakers and seeing what we like the best. For the most part, we went with the Eclipse set of speakers, and I did not go with a system, a pre-packaged system, rather put together different pieces as it fit the room as well as our budget. For the front speakers, I ended up going with the identical 3 floor standing speakers in the front left, front right, and center. There is some debate about if it's better to use a dedicated center, one of those horizontal speakers, or a floor standing one. After doing some research, I think you can go either way, but I went with the 3 identical ones to give a seamless sound across. And the speaker I ended up going with is the Eclipse Reference Premier RP5000s. After listening to various speakers at the store, I felt this was the best bang for the buck and one that fit our space. For the rear and surround speakers, we ended up going with these bipolar speakers from Eclipse. So Reference Premier 402. With bipolar speakers, the sound experience is slightly enhanced as the design allows the sound to be produced in multiple directions, making the surround sound field wider. At least in theory, this makes sense, and for us, we do get good sound out of these speakers. For the Atmos speakers, I did not go with the Eclipse speakers. Rather, I went with a couple of cheaper speakers that I got off of Amazon. They are the Mica M8Cs, and I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. For the moment at least, we only put in 2 of the height speakers. However, it is wired to accept 2 more, so that we can have a total of 4 Dolby Atmos speakers. I also use the same speakers for outside in other areas of the basement to provide for the Zone 2 sound. I already showed a few times the 2 subwoofer setups. My initial plan was only to have a single subwoofer. However, on Amazon I got a really great deal on these 12-inch Clips subwoofers, R120Ws. Since they were so good of a deal, I ended up going with 2 and no regrets. Low sound that I get out of these subs, and the overall system is just really great. I guess it goes without saying, overall I am very much satisfied with how good it sounds in here. Of course, I am no expert when it comes to this type of stuff, so my reference is just listening to different systems and what sounds good or not. You can certainly go higher than this, but for the money that we spend, I feel we got really good output out of these speakers. Of course, the heart of the theater is based off of the projector, and for that I ended up going with an Epson 5040UB. It's quite a large projector, however, the clarity that comes out of it, the color that comes out of it has been really good. It's branded as a 4K projector. It's not a true 4K, however, for the naked eye, for my eye at least, it looks really sharp, and especially with the dark room and the sound, it gives for a really great movie experience in the theater. For the mount that holds the projector, there are a lot of options. I ended up going with a Sanus VP1 mount. This does provide some adjustability to dial in the projector properly on the screen. I have not had any issues. I have kids playing above the theater all the time. That's moving the house at times, and so far it's been able to keep the projector steady and not have me readjust it all the time. For the screen, as I mentioned, I've been with an acoustically transparent screen. This was purchased off of Amazon. It is a silver ticket screen, the STR 169-120. So it's a 120-inch screen. For the room, I did not want to go any larger than that. 120, I think, is the right size for a 20 by 14 room like this. From Amazon, you get the screen in a tube. There is a little bit of assembly involved in putting it together, but it's nothing too difficult. Based on the number of speakers that I have in the room, so that's 2 in the front, 1 center, 2 in the back, 2 surround, and 2 height speakers for the Atmos and the 2 subwoofers, I needed at least a 9-channel receiver. Initially, I purchased an Onkyo TX RZ830. I used that for a little bit. It worked okay. However, I had a lot of trouble just dialing in the sound right, as well as with the Bluetooth setup. And overall, I found that to be a little harder to use. So once I found a good deal on a Yamaha, I later upgraded to a Yamaha RX B2085. It's a 9.2 channel receiver. This allows me to take full advantage of the speakers, provide a 7.2.2 system, and also seamlessly use my Zone 2 speakers outside so that I can have either the same content playing to another TV outside along with the sound, or a video and sound playing in here with another music track, let's say, playing in other parts of the house. Just like any receiver, it's really important, and I can't stress this enough, it's really important to do the proper calibration. So I used the mic and the wire that came with the receiver to do the calibration in the theater. It immensely improved the sound. Absolutely do the calibration, and even beyond that, you may have to do a little bit of tweaking to just get it right. So as mentioned, I have a 2-zone setup where there's 9 speakers in here, and then I have 4 speakers outside. So with the 9-channel receiver, obviously the math doesn't add up there. So what I ended up doing is to add a speaker switch for the Zone 2. So the Zone 2 is connected onto the speaker switch, and the speaker switch is connected to one of the channels in the receiver. This is probably not the best setup from an audio perspective. However, for what I intend to do here, which is just to play background music on Zone 2, this is more than enough, and it's working out really well. Of course, having the receiver is important, having the screen is important, having the projector is important, having the sound is important, but unless you have some content to play on all this, it doesn't all come together. And I tried a few different options. What we ended up settling with is the Apple TV 4K. For the most part, this is able to play almost all the content out there. It provides Dolby Atmos sound. It has a really easy interface, and most things I can control with just the Apple TV remote, and it's been working out really well. So with the HDMI and the ARC feature, the Apple TV remote is able to control almost everything. So when I walk into the theater, usually you just use the projector remote to turn on the projector, and that turns on the receiver and the Apple TV, and from there on you can control almost everything directly from the Apple TV remote. If you are in the building stages of a theater, you probably know how expensive theater seating can be. So the powered theater seats are quite expensive. These seats are not the most expensive. They come from the Sam's Club, and I believe later even Costco also has a version. These attached together. They're all individually controlled, and they're comfortable. They're fully reclining, so it serves the theater and the purpose really well. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this was certainly a passion project, one that I've had in my mind for a long time, and one that we wanted to execute. With all the research, it certainly took some time to put this all together, and I'm sure there's a lot of areas that we can improve on. And if there's any suggestions that you have, please feel free to put that in the comments. But given all that, I believe the output that we were able to accomplish for the money that we spent has been really good. The quality of the sound, the video itself, the experience has been really good, and one that my family and I have been enjoying almost daily for some time now. I hope you've enjoyed the walkthrough of the theater. This was not very difficult. Of course, it takes some time and effort, but it's not very difficult, and I'm hoping you are able to take bits and pieces out of this in putting together your own theater. So best of luck to you, and thank you for watching.